So, Gerald, I've read the budget line on your story, and I know it's something that you're excited about because I heard you talking about it in the newsroom. So, tell me about the story you're working on for this Sunday.
This story is about probably the most infamous case in Tallahassee history, 1959 rape case in which a black FAMU co-ed was raped by 4 white men, and the 4 white men were convicted and sent to prison by an all-white jury, one of the first times ever in Florida or the South that white men were convicted of raping a black woman.
And you actually interviewed this woman.
I interviewed the woman. She's living in a place, we're not saying where she's living because she still fears reprisals. At least 3 of the 4 men are still alive, and 2 of them are out of prison. And she still continues to fear 52 years later for her life, so we're not telling where she lives.
One of the most compelling things about this story in talking to you that has occurred to me is how difficult it's going to be for you as a writer to help people to understand, people who live in this period of time, what life was like for African Americans especially, but even for white people, that is so different from 1959 to now.
Right.
And just the believability that these things actually occurred in places like Tallahassee.
Yeah, we're going to get some comment from people who are older, white people who've lived through the years. So why are you still bringing that up? And one of the reasons we're bringing it up is because it's just 52 years ago. I mean, this is still, for this woman who's still alive, and for many who are her age or older who lived through it, this actually was how life was. For people now, younger people who must find some of the talk about racial relations in the past to seem like fiction, it's almost hard to believe, but back in 1959, a crime like this against a black woman was not taken seriously. In court, the attorneys for the 4 men, she was kidnapped. She was with friends. She was kidnapped by these 4 men at gunpoint, at knife point, and taken into the woods and raped 7 times. And yet, at the trial, the main effort by the defense attorneys were to get her to admit, you didn't mind it, did you? I mean, you had sex with them willingly. Never mind she was kidnapped. Never mind she was kidnapped at gun and knife point. The feeling was in those days that this is something we would never do to a victim now on stand for rape. They tried to make it seem like it was her fault. You could have left at any time. I mean, they were holding a gun to your head, but you could have left at any time. Really, you enjoyed the sex. In fact, after the trial and after the convictions, the judge, May Walker, the late May Walker, received many letters from white citizens who were outraged that these men had been convicted. One of them was by a woman who said, hey, everybody knows black women enjoy being raped by white men. I mean, that was the thinking then. The idea that a black woman, or a black person for that matter, could have the same rights, dignities, and respect as a white person, it wasn't accepted.
Well, this trial was historic for Tallahassee, certainly.
Historic, yeah.
For Florida, but really nationally, it was also
It was covered by the New York Times. It was covered by London papers. It was covered by Time magazine. Everybody recognized the historic significance of white men on trial for a black woman, for a crime against a black woman. I think one of the reasons they drew them was they recognized that this was almost an open and shut case against the white men. There were so many cases where white men had been accused and brought to trial for raping black women and had been acquitted. So, I mean, I think the national press recognized that this may be where the worm turns. And indeed, the worm did turn. And indeed, over the next several months, several white men in Alabama, South Carolina, and Mississippi were convicted of raping black women. And it became a pivotal point in the civil rights movement, which is the thesis of, in fact, of the woman who's written a book about this.
Now, I don't want you to tell your whole story because I do want people to pick up the
That's
newspaper
right.
and read it on
available on newsstands. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do.
And if you haven't activated
your account, please.
But talk me through 2 pieces of it. One, where she was actually captured. As I understand it, people pulled up next to the car. And then the second, when police encountered.
Right. They had the four students were all students at FAMU, and they'd gone to the annual Orange and Green Ball, and afterwards they had gone out. Frankly, I think they'd gone out parking. They'd gone out. They'd gone over
What
by
students do.
What students do. It was after midnight. They had finished the ball. They'd gone, and they were over by Jake Gaither Golf Course, which at that time also at one end of it was a drive-in that black patrons went to. So they were parked outside that, and they'd only been there 15 minutes when this carload of white men showed up, and allegedly, I mean, they were cruising for trouble, frankly. They'd gone out, in one account, they'd gone out looking for some black males who they were angry at, and another account, they had made a pact to go out there and get themselves a black woman. And in case they pulled up, they stuck a gun in there. They ordered the two young men out of the car and put them on their knees, took the two women out, then told the two young men to get back in the car and drive away. As they did that, one of the black women took off running. The other one, the one in our story, had to remain there. They then took her, drove her away, raped her 7 times. The amazing part in many ways, they captured.
And then claimed that
They claimed that she
didn't.
couldn't. Yeah, but in fact, one of the attorneys during the trial said, "Hey, there was woods just 10 feet away. Why didn't you just go off into the woods?" Well, she was laying on the ground with men with guns and knives. What was perhaps amazing, especially it's a worm turner too, is that the two men, once they drove away, actually circled back, found the other black woman who had run away. They all got in the car and they went looking for a police officer. They came to a sheriff's deputy named Joe Cook. He was 19 himself, just as the woman who was raped. He was a 19-year-old intern from Florida State working in the sheriff's office, working his first ever solo patrol. They told him what happened. He said, "We're going to find him." They then drove all around the south side until they came across the car. They finished raping the woman. They were bringing her back, and this was part of their defense. Hey, we were bringing her back. You know, we were going to drop her off at FAMU. Anyway, he found them. Well, then they took off running. He chased them at speeds up to 90 miles an hour. Eventually, corners them down on Railroad Avenue. Holds them at gunpoint until other sheriff's people show up. That man, Joe Cook, is still alive. He's unfortunately, I have not been able to find him. He lived in Marianna until recently, but he was a hero in all this, and he was impeached on the stand. When he was called to stand, they impeached him as they tried to degrade what he had done by saying that he was some kind of activist himself, rather than just a sheriff doing what he should have done.
A deputy doing his job.
Deputy doing his job.
So, she agreed to talk to you.
Yes.
Has she talked about this before or often?
She has not talked about it to the press since 1959. In 1959, several black newspapers, such as the Pittsburgh Courier and the Amsterdam News, conducted interviews with her. Understand that, as best I can tell, the white press didn't even make an attempt to talk to her after the trial.
Meaning us.
Meaning us. Frankly, to our credit, for those who are, the Dixiecrat, as some have used to criticize us, we covered it as front page news from the report of the arrest to the indictment. We covered it, to our credit, we covered it as it should have been covered. So she has not talked since 1959 about this, yes. And she's still quite emotional about it.
I bet so.
She had not told her family until recently.
Really?
Right.
Well, I look forward to reading it.
Very good.
Thanks for sitting down and talking about it.
I enjoyed it, Bob. Thank you.
Bye.